This is the Tabernacle Podcast with John Familia and me, Britton Bishop. What's up, John?
I'm tired.
Got the Celsius?
I'm tired of saying goodbye to you. This is the longest goodbye ever.
I know.
And that's not me saying go away. I almost texted you this morning. Are you sure?
It is. It has been the longest goodbye. And that
woke up today and yeah, I know it's our last podcast.
Last one together.
And I felt like I was coming to a funeral.
Yeah.
It's like, what are we going to do?
I know. Hope and I were driving across the mountain, and I was just like staring. She's like, "You good?" And then I did what anybody would do to distract themselves and started a fight.
Did you really?
It was stupid. I was just being an Enneagram 8. But yeah, last one.
It's been a long goodbye.
It has been.
And you're tired of them too.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, okay, I get it, everybody.
Yep.
But it's better to overdo it than underdo it, because I've underdone goodbyes before.
Yeah.
And then the person hated me later.
Yeah, I think.
It's like, oh, so you don't really care? No, it was so hard that I just said, whatever. Oh, you don't care.
Yep.
Okay.
That's how this one. There have been moments where it's like, man, we should have just Irish goodbye'd this thing. But I think the reality is this one mattered. There have been goodbyes I've said that were like, see ya, like leaving Oklahoma.
And now you're going back.
I know. But like even packing, I remember the difference between packing to come here and packing to go back. Yeah. I didn't pack till we had the U-Haul at the house.
Oh, really?
And I was just like throwing stuff in boxes. Like, man, we'll figure it out when we get there. Now Hope's got us dialed in.
Oh,
We've got every box.
You've got a full-time administrator.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a grind. But we've made it.
It's okay. So, she doesn't listen to this podcast.
No, she doesn't at all. I know somebody, she's upstairs right now, and somebody's like, are you going to be on the podcast today? And she looked at me and she's like, is that why you guys? And I was like, no.
No.
I would never.
No, I intend.
I value my marriage
You
too
should have
much.
said, look, I intend to stay married to you for more than a minute. Okay?
We made it to remove. I'm not going to let a podcast get us divorced. But we made it. 130 episodes.
This is the 130th?
Yep.
But there's actually, you told me there's actually
131.
Yeah, that's a little Easter egg if you're part of the podcast.
Because we trick moved them at the beginning because we thought people would only listen to 5 episodes. We were like, all right, listen, if you just give us 5 episodes,
you gotta give us
5. But then we trick moved by doing an episode 0, so it was actually 6.
It's like the hidden one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so episode 0. I think today what we're going to do, podcast
Yeah, what are we doing today?
Well, as John and Britton would, we didn't have a plan coming into this, but then it hit us.
You had a plan. It just wasn't fleshed out.
The greatest hits, I think.
Oh, no.
No, I think I would like for my last one just to go through. One, I would love to talk about why we have a podcast. I think as you go and you start doing episodes and all this stuff, it can be easy to forget, why did we start doing this in the first place? Because there was the day, right? I remember stealing from multiple offices and microphones and trying our best to go to Harbor Freight and buying moving blankets and nailing them up and just doing all the stupid things. Me and John Williams put a lot of holes in here that Matt Hughes had to fix later on.
That's right.
But that was kind of
dungeon.
Yeah, the why behind the podcast. So at the beginning, why podcast, John?
Why podcast? Well, I think the first time I started thinking about a podcast had to be more than 10 years ago. It was probably more like 12 or 13. We're talking about podcasts. And I had started to hear podcasts, and I thought that there would be a way that we could continue to provide some type of contact or content or touch point for people in the tab. Mm-hmm. So like, back in the day, like way back in the day, like when I was a kid,
right,
you had church 3 times a week at minimum. And that's not including Sunday school or other special events. There was Sunday school and Sunday morning church. There was Sunday night church. There was Wednesday night prayer meeting. There might be youth group on a different night. And there was always something going on. I don't want to go back to that.
Right.
But there's also something good in continuing to remain in contact with our congregation, or to continue to provide some type of content, teaching, preaching, Bible study. Not everybody in 2023, which is where we're sitting right now, but this was 10 years ago, even in 2010, is able to get back to Buckley or back to their church service or whatever. So the idea was, hey, let's have a podcast. Now, on the I had no idea how to do a podcast or what to do on a podcast or even who would be on the podcast, but I thought It's better than a radio show.
Yep.
Let's do a podcast. And Mike Anderson told me like 2 weeks ago. Mike's on our board. You know Mike. He works with our student ministry. Awesome guy. And I don't know what made him think about this, but he came up to me and says, when you first mentioned podcast years ago, he goes, I didn't really understand what you meant. He knew what a podcast was,
right,
but I think he didn't think that I knew what a podcast was. And so he worked really, really, really hard to get our sermons online.
Yep.
And he thought, well, that's what John meant.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what he was trying to say was, bro, I could have given you a podcast over a decade ago, but instead I just got the sermons online,
right,
and it's like, I want it all, right? But have mentioned it over the years, and it never really got legs. And then you showed up, man. And you just took it and run with it.
I had nothing to do. This pandemic that won't be named, and it was just one of those. Got to do something.
You're bored?
Yeah.
No, but that's a shout out to Britton Bishop. I don't know if I'm not really shouting out because you're right here.
Yeah.
But since you gave me the shirt, I don't know if people are watching or I don't know how to do this.
Free shout outs.
Yeah. Britton showed up today with gifts for the rest of the podcast staff.
If I could
Benjamin's
leave this
got
podcast with one thing, it's boys, don't forget. No free shout outs.
No free shout outs. No free shout outs, man.
Yeah, I think that was kind of, I was in a similar spot to what you're talking about. Is I was in a place where podcasts were starting to become something I was consuming often. I was seeing guys that were pushing out content, some really cool, some stupid, funny, whatever. But it was like, man, there's something to this. The platform of just podcasting in general has grown so much through YouTube and Spotify and different things like that. And I don't know, I think that I knew when I came here that there was more to be offered. It was like I'd sat in the circle upstairs when you and Tim and myself and whoever else was sitting in the circle that day would start having a conversation, and you'd have those moments of like, man, somebody needs to record this.
Right.
Or we'd be sitting down here in one of the back in the day pastoral meetings, and you'd have John Williams drop some wisdom bomb about grief, and it's like, that doesn't need to stay in this room.
Yeah.
And so I started turning the wheels of like, man, we could do something with this.
So kind of a way to take people or to bring people closer.
Yeah.
Because a large church, multiple locations, you can't always get up close with everyone. So this is a chance to get up close or behind the curtain or whatever that looks like.
And I think within our church family, within our staff, within our pastoral staff, there's so much wisdom and knowledge and experience and failure and just all the things that come with years of following Jesus that you can't fit it into 37 minutes on the weekend. And so it felt like it's like...
And not everyone can sit at your Fight Club table.
Right. Yeah. And we have 40 pastors on staff. So it's like, we got to give these guys something to do.
Not quite 40.
But just that moment of like, okay, like there's a lot to be gleaned here than just the 37 minutes in a sermon or a Fight Club circle. And so that kind of led to this, man, what can we do with this? And so it was like, well, let's try this. And so
your answer was better than mine on the why. 100% better.
Yeah, but I think I agree. That was originally that was the thing we talked about is we wanted to be able to offer a midweek touch point. That's why the episodes drop on Wednesdays for the church family. But then I don't know, I think that was what we started as, and then it just started growing and it started going. We thought people were going to listen to 5 episodes. I remember the first 2 episodes, Your Changed Life Story. I think that was when it really clicked, and we were only 2 episodes in. This is our bread and butter. Change life stories.
Yeah.
And so...
and that was your call. That was your call to, hey, let's do a deep dive, because it was awkward. We decided you're going to be the host, and then we didn't know how to do a podcast, and then you come on here, and you're like, we're going to do your change life story. And it's like, I don't want me right out of the gate, whatever.
Yeah.
But I'm grateful because... in order to put people in the hot seat. And it's not a hot seat.
No.
But, and we can talk about that later. How many people have you talked to like, oh, I could never be on the podcast? And then we finally convince them, they get down here, headphones in the microphone, they won't shut up. Right? Because there's just something about the vibe or whatever. But it was good to be in the seat.
Yeah.
Early on, or first.
For sure.
In order to make it happen.
Yeah, and I think that what I learned in that 2 episodes was how much you can learn from somebody else's walk with
somebody's
Jesus.
story. Yeah.
From somebody else's failures, their shortcomings, their griefs, and just the times where God has shown up time after time after time after time in somebody's life. And so there was kind of this realization of like, we have something here, I think, is what I kind of like, you don't know it at the time, but you're looking at it like, this is something you don't find anywhere else. Like, sure, Jocko does his 12.5-hour episodes with Medal of Honor recipients and stuff like that, but I think there's just this picture of like, the church needs to hear these things, and not just your story or my story or Benji's story someday when his life finally changes.
No free shout outs, Benji.
But that there's so many just like saints. I think back through the episodes, Neil Grove.
Yeah.
Right. A guy that if you didn't know any better, he'd just be the dude who cuts the grass here.
Yeah.
He's the guy that he prays like, and you didn't know that about him. You didn't know that while he's cutting the grass, he's praying for this church.
Right.
Or the Larry Cates. It's like, I bought a tractor from that guy, but I didn't. You hear about all the things that God has done in his life. But then not even within that, you get I'm trying to think of some of my favorites. You get Tim
Burgess.
Yeah.
He's a Medal of Honor recipient.
Yeah.
Medal of Honor in the Drugs and Alcohol Hall of Fame.
Yeah. And you hear the story of everything that led to this Jedi master that we now have.
Yeah.
Because if you don't know that, you're like, oh, Tim's just kind of always been like that.
Yeah.
And then you start to realize that there's stories to all. So I think the Changed Life story.
And he's still changing.
Yeah. And then I think that was for me, the Changed Life story portion was always a favorite to record until we did our first Bible study.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
And that was, I think, the first one we ever did, if I'm not mistaken. I'm scrolling through the episodes now, is we did a 2-part episode. No, it's one episode, episode 13, on what does it mean to be good soldiers of Christ. And we studied 1 Timothy. And we dialed that up, and I think that was probably...
What episode was that?
Episode 13.
13.
Yep. Because we had Foster Christie on here the first time.
We had Uncle Charlie Alcock.
Yeah.
That was episode 8. What's wrong with kids these days with Uncle Charlie?
Which is still, to this day, some people's favorites.
Oh, yeah. Because he just crushed it. Like it was a trick move. I don't want to ruin it for you. Because I'm a guy, I don't know, like you, like when I get turned on to a podcast, I'll go all the way back to the beginning. But there's some people that just get the latest, or they'll just pick and choose. But yeah, if you're a parent, that's a good one. Yep. Number 8.
But then we did the first ever Fight Club on the podcast. And that was one that we were like, do people really want to listen to this? Like us just talk about the Bible? And then we also realized that 2 verses will provide us with about 2 hours of content if we really wanted to.
2 preachers for the Bible and 2 hours of content. And we're all of a sudden like, I see you flipping through the pages, and so I just keep talking because Benji's got the camera on me. And then they come back to you, and then I know there's people that are like, how do they come up with this stuff? No, we kind of come up with this system.
Yes.
If I'm on the iPad or I'm like finding a cross-reference, Britton starts, pulling a Ricky Bobby.
Yep.
What do I do with my hands?
Might as well just preach.
And then I'll give you I'm ready. And then,
And which could all be eliminated probably if we prepared.
And did a little research. But no, it's better this way because it feels kind of, whatever. We had your stepmom on here on episode 11.
Yeah, Miss Kelly, Change Life Story.
That was, and we had a couple other Change Life stories, I think, before that. We had Tim's
and yours.
And mine, but hers, man, that was unbelievable.
Yeah, I think that was our first one where it was like, oh, this doesn't just have to be staff members.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because she just laid out her whole, and I don't want to ruin it for you, but Britton's stepmother on episode 11, Miss Kelly, who I forget how many surgeries she had as a result of that brutal car crash.
Yeah.
And then how God put her back together, but not just her body, putting back her soul. And it was like, oh, this is deep.
Yes.
I wasn't quite ready for that. Yeah.
And then, sorry, this is the whole podcast. So if you're listening to this and you're like, this is awful. This is what we're talking about today. So.
Oh, we did a book review.
Barbarian Way.
Yeah. Yeah. Because
forgot about that.
That's why the rhino.
Yeah. Tell them why.
That's why the rhino.
Maybe we told them during that one, but we've had a rhino on the table this whole time.
So this rhino comes.
Today, Benji.
This rhino comes all the way from, must have been 15 years ago. 15 years ago. So God used the book The Barbarian Way profoundly in my life and in Tim's life to convince us that we could take a shot and be pastors, try to make the church we always want to go to.
Yeah.
And in that book, Barbarian Way, Erwin McManus does a deep dive into the different kinds of animals, what you call them when they come together in a group. So like a group of dolphins together is called a pod. Usually birds together are called a flock. Vultures together are called a committee. That's why I'm forever telling our board we don't have board committees. We have board teams because I don't want to be a vulture, right? But he said by far and away his favorite was the rhinoceros.
Yeah.
Because the rhinoceros is called a crash. And the reason they're called a crash is I don't know how many tons rhinos weigh, but they run like 30 miles an hour.
Yep.
Like when all that meat gets moving,
Yeah.
30 miles an hour doesn't stop in a heartbeat. And that's made even worse by the fact that they can only see 30 feet. Their eyesight is only 30 feet. And so his whole point in the book was that's what the church should be like. We should be going 30 miles an hour, following Christ with all of the weight of us together, trusting that whatever is beyond 30 feet, God's got us, even if it turns into a horrific crash.
Yep.
Because all this stuff, they sell it to Christian bookstores. No offense to Christian bookstores, but no free shout-outs either, right? Is I'm going to rise up on eagle's wings, and it's always something eagly.
It's always just some adverb. Rise.
Or I'm a little sheepy sheep, And he was like, no, the church should be way more like the rhino. So all that to say, somebody bought us this, and it has been in this church for the last 15 years. And people are like, why the rhino?
Love it. Yeah.
So now he lives in the podcast room.
Yes, he does.
He doesn't have a name.
Nope.
Maybe we call him Britton. Call him Bishop. Bishop the Rhino. No, that's bad.
So, anyways.
Did you say you're stealing that today?
Yeah, I will.
All right, that's Barbarian Way 17. One of the cool things that we were able to do here, we got Britton Bishop's Change Life Story in 20 and 21.
Yeah.
I think that's when we started to figure out how long to make the podcast.
Yep.
Let's talk about the timing.
Yeah.
Because we've done some that are a couple hours long.
Yep.
But somewhere along the way, they got to be right around an hour, maybe a little hour over, maybe not.
I think it was when we got a real producer.
Was it?
I think it was when we got the Benji. And he just kind of locked us in. As like, hey, this is how long you guys talk. I'll let you know when you're done.
He's let some go longer.
Yeah.
But what is the signal? Like, what's the signal that he's done?
Oh, I do. As soon as I see him put the camera on you, I look back like this at Benji, give him one of these, and he'll go, which means we're at 55 minutes.
55.
It's pretty accurate. Usually when I look at you, we're right around there every time, don't you think? Yeah.
It's right around, like you have like that internal clock.
Yeah, it's one of those, like we've kind of figured it out. But then like you get the Bill Stone episodes, which we'll get to here in a little bit.
Yeah, he didn't mess with that.
But you get to that and it's like, this one's going 2.5, boys.
But he's making that call on the fly.
Yeah.
But what was the signal before the look? Because you're forgetting, there was a signal before the look.
Is that when I touch my wrist?
No, there's a signal that he gave you or me.
When he's done?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, the sigh. Yeah. My bad.
You just hear this?
Yeah. That meant Benji's done, and so is everybody else.
Or if you hear that, that means stop singing.
Yes. Benji, what do you remember what episode you started with? The first one that was video, right? That was your first episode?
I think so.
It might have been like the second one.
Okay.
First or
Yeah, because my Change Life wasn't, Andy's wasn't.
I mean,
Fear with Tim.
I was on John Williams, but I didn't do it.
Yeah, you sat there for John Williams' Change Life Story because you wanted to get the feel.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
Yeah, that was a good Change Life
story. So then his first one would have been...
Wasn't Charlie.
It wasn't Charlie Marcus.
Oh, it was What Does God Say About My Identity with Chris... No, that was Ben Brown. Where was our first one that was video? I don't remember. Somebody do some research.
Yeah, we didn't do much
Adams was video. Maybe it was...
Was Tim Burgess the first one that we put an explicit rating on it?
Yes.
Yes.
Tim Burgess and Clayton Porter
were the first two.
Are the two that have earned explicit ratings.
Yeah.
No one else.
No one else has?
Well, I guess Bill's. We didn't put an E on it, though.
No, we didn't
put a
put an
disclaimer.
E. We just put a warning.
Yeah.
Yeah, we put a
So
warning
Clayton
on
Porter and Tim Burgess
Right.
are the two people that have earned explicit E's.
One of the fun things that we're able to do on here is also look at topics.
Yeah.
Like different topics. And you've been really good at, coming up with some of those. Like episode 35 was on forgiveness. 36, why do we gather? There was something, there was times that we actually picked a topic based on a scripture. Like episode 40, we looked at rejection.
Was that when we were going through the book of Luke, though, but we did like the overview?
Yeah, it might have been. Yeah.
Yep.
And then, of course, and I believe this was your idea, was when we went through that little DNA series of the church.
Yeah.
And we tried to spread them out so people could find the ones that they wanted to listen to.
Yeah, I think it was important for us because we were kind of that was a big, like, almost, for the lack of a better term, like the church was kind of on a resurgence. Like we were seeing growth numbers start coming back. People are coming back from the pandemic. They're starting to come back to church. Things are getting more consistent. We're growing. And there was just this thing of like, man, we need to talk about who we are for the people listening to the podcast, maybe people that are new. It's good to be reminded because I remember for me when I first became a part of this church, our DNA was a huge part of why I said yes.
Right.
Because I was looking at these things that are the DNA of the Tabernacle, and it's like, these are the things that make this church. And outside of Jesus, his spirit, all that stuff. But just this realization that these are important. And I think if we're kind of on this resurgence back to growing and thriving and seeking to continue taking ground for the kingdom, we've been fighting a lot of, for the lack of a better term, like auxiliary fights.
Yeah.
Over the last year and a half, 2 years, we kind of lost sight of what are we really about? You could hear the murmurs, whatever, in the lobbies and all that as people start to trickle back in. And it felt like it was important to do a series where we talked about this is the Tabernacle.
This is what we're about.
Yeah.
This is what
like
God's church
reminder.
is supposed to be about.
Yeah.
So we know how to fight the right fight.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so we talked about we let the Holy Spirit be the Holy Spirit. Then we had an awesome episode with Chris Emery where we talked about progressive Christianity.
Yeah, we're going to do that again.
yeah.
I mean, either the topic or Chris or both.
Yeah, that was a good one. Chris liked it so much that he started his own podcast.
I know. No free
No free shout-outs,
Bayview.
Have you been on? I've been on it.
I have not.
Okay, I was on an
How has it you
episode.
been on? I haven't been on.
Andrew had us on with our brotherhood. He had Trey, Garrett, myself. But I'm going to be honest with
I'm
you.
going to see that.
I might have
I'm gonna give Chris a
I
hard
might
time.
have screwed around the whole time.
Did you really?
I'm not letting this podcast be good. Then we talked about, we had Foster and Laura.
Oh, yeah. Foster Christie's been returning
Yes.
several times.
All the above.
Yeah.
But it
One
was
of my
even
favorites.
better with Laura.
But because we're giving the reels, this is a different episode. Is it okay that I'm saying this?
Yeah. People need to know who it was.
No, I'm saying, is it okay that we're doing this podcast like this? Why?
He needs to know.
No.
It's our podcast. We do whatever we want.
There, I just wanted to hear it one more time. It's our podcast. We do whatever we want.
It's our podcast.
So
we do whatever we
Foster
want.
Christie, love him,
Yes.
as John Williams say, love him. But if you listen to any Foster Christie episodes, he's got this giant watch. And this is him the entire time.
And then you just hear Benji.
Wasn't on that one.
You weren't?
Yes,
Yeah, I
you
was.
were. He's been
Yeah,
on
you were
multiple
recording.
times.
He wasn't banging.
Yeah.
He's
Foster?
always
I don't
banging the
Oh,
table.
yeah, he is.
You always hear clunking,
Yep.
banging, whatever the deal
Well, the
is.
Laura one was nice because she was here to correct him.
Oh, yeah.
We had
Miss
Laura here. Yeah.
Hey, Foster. Yeah, this is Laura. Yeah. Oh, Johnny,
Oh,
that's
this is a
so
good
nice that you said that about
We were in
us.
the Luke chunks, DNA chunks, but then in the midst of that, episode 51, Rachel Vor's changed life story.
Oh, wow. That was next level, too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what was significant? What episode was that?
51.
51 is...
Because we forgot about 50.
Oh, really? We skipped
Every
one?
landmark, we did it, but we just always forget
Oh, we didn't have the
that we've hit
landmark.
landmarks.
Gotcha. Yeah, we forget the significance of numbers.
Right.
So with episode 51 with Rachel Vore, one of the things that impressed me about that episode was similar to the episode that your stepmother did, is how brave she was.
Yeah.
Like your stepmom, Miss Kelly, was like, what are all this technology and why am I in this dungeon with
Yeah.
Britton and John? And she was just so brave.
Wasn't as well lit.
It wasn't as well lit. But by episode 50, now it's been over a
Right.
year, and Rachel's aware that her Tab family listens to this.
Yep.
She listens to this. People are talking about it. And she got on there with full because Miss Kelly could have said, is anyone ever really going to hear this?
Right. And we didn't know.
But Rachel gets on here. By this time, you've got us on the app. You've got us on Spotify. You've got us on YouTube.
Yep.
Right? And she just went out there and bravely told her story, knowing that people are going to say stupid things.
Yep.
And people did say stupid things. There's a couple people said some really stupid things because people in general don't know how to act, right?
100%.
But I was just so impressed with her courage.
Yeah, for sure.
So let me ask you a question.
Okay.
Before we go through this whole list, because this is I don't want to. People can go through the list.
Yep.
When did you realize, aside from you look at the metrics that I don't know how to access, right? When did you realize the podcast was like starting to pick up? Like, are there any stories for you where it's like, interesting.
Yeah.
This podcast is reaching more than just the 20 people that are nerding out on podcasts like us.
Yeah, I think there's a few touch points along the way. Like, I can look back to some Facebook messages maybe that I had received from people that were, hey, your podcast, man, that really impacted. And you're like, you listen to the podcast?
Oh, people are listening?
And the people from Oklahoma, people from all around the country that we'd do events when the two of us would travel and speak at different places, and then people kind of grab hold of that. But I remember one time John Williams was like, because we look at the metrics and it's like, I remember Dubai, and you're like, nobody's listening in Dubai. Like, this is a weird bug that's happening in this app. And I remember John Williams,
one's in the Middle East listening to Dubai.
I think it was John Williams' sister. Is it a sister?
I can't
nephew,
remember.
niece, somebody. He's like, yeah, they love the podcast and they live here. And I'm like, whoa. And so I think it was just this realization as people were sharing it. And I'm sure there's a story that I'm just not remembering of all the times, but there was one, there's a guy that's been listening to the podcast for a long time, named Matt. And, he lives in Indiana, but I remember the first time he reached out, and I don't know his connection to the Tabernacle. I think he's friends with somebody on Facebook that went here, and somebody somehow got shared, and I might be butchering this completely. But since then, dude's visited the church. He spoke at Lake Ann, but like this awesome kind of like you build this community, and it's just like this podcast. And I think it comes from people sharing it on Facebook, people share, and then you have the crazy aunt in California that listens, and all of a sudden she shares it. And so, but I think it was around like these DNA, Luke, Rachel's episode, because Rachel's episode was our first one on YouTube that really blew up. And so all of those ones, and then episode 54, Santiago Fuentes. And he's a big reason of why we've kind of, I mean, we're listened to a lot, and a lot of like in Mexico and Latin America. Yeah, because Santi has shared stuff. He was on the episode, and he's, he speaks all over Mexico.
Right.
And so I think just him being on the podcast was awesome. But I think there was just I don't know if there's weight might be a bad word, because I don't want to make it sound like it's something that it's not. Like there's just like this Shekinah glory that happens in the podcast. But there was a moment where it was like, oh, there is something to be stewarded here. Yeah. Like it was more than just John and Britton are having fun. It was like, well, this matters to people. Yeah. Like this is making an impact. This is something people are looking to as a resource. This is something that people are tuning into. And I think it was around that episode 50 time where that really started to click. Like people are listening and this matters. So maybe we should.
See, I think something out of the pandemic, of which will not be named. I think people were so I would be interested to see, did podcasts in general start to increase in numbers of people listening during that time, or the numbers of podcasts that started, right?
For sure.
And so we were part of that slew of many. You know, I remember when you told me that we were one of the few that was actually on Spotify
with video. Yeah.
And it was like, was it 25? Yeah. It was like 25, and it's the Tabernacle and a bunch of other ones, and Joe Rogan. And I was like, okay, snap, well done, Britton, right? But now,
no Britton about it.
Ooh, Lord Matthew Corey.
That's when the podcast made a change.
Yeah, that's right.
From the beginning, Matt's been a part of the podcast,
right?
With helping me figure out how to use GarageBand, and he recorded the original guitar riff that kind of went as our intro music.
We might need to hear that. I'm just saying.
Can we dial that up, Benji?
But yeah,
See what I can find.
keep telling. Sorry.
Yeah, but I think that's somebody that has made this podcast.
he got in and made us pro.
Yeah, 100%. This is the guitar riff.
This is the
from
original.
Lord Matthew Corey Hughes.
This is the Tab Podcast with John Vermillion and me.
Screw it up.
Just get out.
There we go.
There we go. Yeah. He made the second one too.
Oh, yeah. But that one just had like
we might have to.
It's like a little Whiskey Myers vibe to
maybe
it.
he'll put it on the beginning of this one. We don't know.
I don't know.
We don't know.
Probably not.
So back to the original thing. This is when I knew that it was more than just Britton and John and Benji
Right.
screwing around. Is I want to say that first winter when we were doing the podcast, and I'm at Crystal Mountain Ski Resort waiting for Gabby to get done. So I'm, trying to I'm the chauffeur.
Yep.
She's with the ski club and I'm doing the pickup. So I went a little bit early and I'm sitting in the restaurant getting some sermon prep done. And a guy that I don't think I'd ever seen before just walks by and he stops. I think he was a barback, or what's it called? Is it a barback or a beer back? I don't know. The dude that carries the stuff into the bar. Yeah, just at a restaurant. I mean, he does a lot of things there.
Right.
I've since gotten to know him, but at the time I didn't know him. And he's walking by and he says something like, "Hey man, really appreciate the podcast." And I'm like, "Do I know you?"
Is that the guy that gave us free golf?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's Adam, man. Come on.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
And since then, made a friend, been in Fight Club, had him in my first Timothy Fight Club and all this kind of stuff. But while he's working, he's got the Tab Podcast, among other things, in his ears. So that was the first time. And then there's been a lot of time since, the messages, the shout outs. But this was random. This just happened 2 days ago. Okay. I haven't told you about this one yet. You're going to love this one, right? So, and the reason we're sharing this is Tab Family. This isn't I'm going to try a really big word here, aggrandizement. This isn't to pat ourselves on the back. This is to thank you and to ask you to continue to share these things.
Absolutely.
And because Benji and I had to go up to Lake Ann, and on our way back, I told him about this brand new gun store that I've seen there. Now, if you're offended by that, Tabernacle is not the church for you, right? But it's like a tactical store, gun store, hunting, fishing. It's just all this outdoor stuff. But let's be honest, Benji's there because he knows more about guns than me, right? And so we pull in there, and super nice guys, and we're just asking them, we're looking at different things behind the counter. This dude behind the counter, he's not as tall as you, but I kid you not, is one of the most jacked human beings I've ever seen. He's got cannonballs for shoulders, smaller cannonballs for bicep. This guy spends a lot of time on the range and at the gym. That's all he does, I can tell. His T-shirt was begging to be free, like of these just giant guns. I mean, why do you need to carry a gun?
Right.
I mean, he's got a bald head, looked intimidating, but really nice guy. And he kept, oh, here, you'd like to see this. Oh, you'd like to, let me tell you about the Tika. Oh, let me tell you about the 30 or the 308, and he was engaged with me and he had said something like, I've never seen this guy in my life, but he had said something about, the problem with this country is we've kicked out God. And then a few other things. But he started with God. Of course, my head snaps. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I'm completely messing around.
Yeah.
And I go, how'd you know I was a preacher? And he goes, oh, no, I didn't. And it's totally random. He says something like, thank you for your service. It's like, okay. Yeah. But then, sorry, Adam Sharp, stolen valor. But then he asked where. And I'm like, I'm one of the pastors at a church down in Buckley called the Tabernacle. And he goes, oh, you guys have a podcast? And I go, yeah. And he goes, yeah, I've heard a couple episodes. That was it.
Interesting.
Never seen this guy. Who's some random dude? Sorry, if you're here, if you're listening, random. You're not random. You are very memorable and a significant person. Please don't hurt
rip
me.
My head off.
He was ginormous, but he's like, yeah, he's heard a couple of. So then it started to sink in. Okay, there's something to, because remember what you used to say all the time. Please like, share. Please subscribe, unsubscribe. Algorithms are real. That's at the beginning. It's just a lot of hard work, and I get it that not every episode's going to connect with every person.
Right.
There is probably a demographic that wishes all we do are Bible studies. Yep. There's a demographic, I just like to change life stories. Another one, I just like when you bring in special guests from the outside,
yep.
Or topics or whatever. The beauty of, this is our podcast, we do whatever we want, is the same DNA as years ago when Tim and I were like, we don't have this big grand plan for the Tabernacle. It's just, we just want to make the church we always wanted to go to, which by the way was an episode, I think 3 or 4, right? And so it's the stuff that we're interested in. And I think what you helped shape is if it blesses anybody, it's worth it.
Yep.
And that's all we're trying to do is be a blessing, a little content. It's more than a touch point now. It's like, some of the episodes you're like, hey, let's talk about all the things that you had to cut out of the sermon because a sermon can only be 37 minutes long. Yeah. All the gleanings or the
leftovers.
Kind of the leftovers that sometimes are better than the main course.
For sure. Not for sure that they're better, but just that I think for me, the things too that I think that are important for people to hear is a lot of the things we've talked about on this podcast because of the way you and I operate. Is these are the things that are currently like cutting us.
Yes,
these are the things that are shaping and molding us. So like the times I remember where we did that episode allegedly, and it was something that was kind of going around in the church. People were talking about what is it, but then it was like, you know what, this is something that's good for us to dig into. I think about the times that we talked about coming home, where we talked about coming on these spiritual highs or these and we had just gone to basics and all this stuff. How do we do this? How do we bring this home? How do I take this mountaintop experience and I don't want to put it in just a bottle, but how do I allow this to navigate? And so I think it's important for people to know that there have been episodes where, I didn't really get anything out of that. And it's like, maybe that one wasn't for you.
Maybe that wasn't for you.
But I can tell you personally, 130 episodes in, that God has used this podcast to disciple me.
Same here.
And so I think
100% same for me. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think maybe everybody just got to be a part of that process. It's like, it wasn't for you, but it was for me today. And my for me was just live for everybody to listen to. But I couldn't tell you how many times Peace in Christ, that was one that we just did last week, that I'm sitting here and I'm in turmoil, I'm in transition, I'm struggling, I'm not sure how we're going to pay for this and that and all these different things. And then you start talking about peace. Start talking about remaining in Christ. Start talking about all these different aspects that when you anchor yourself in something outside of you, what you can control, and there's just so many times where it's like, that was for me today. And sure, some stay-at-home mom, maybe that was for her too. But I can tell you every single time, and it changed life stories. And there have been times where it's like, is anybody going to listen to this?
Right.
That episode's, every time we think the episode's going to be horrible, and then we're like, God, it might have been the best one we've ever done.
Oh, yeah.
But I can say that those have been some of my favorites are those ones. So
I remember coming up with a plan that we were going to get people to email the podcast with their questions.
You want to see them?
And look, have we had like none?
Tabernacle podcast email right here on my mailboxes.
Yeah.
Let's update it.
0.
See that?
Nobody emails the podcast.
No mail.
No mail.
No junk mail. No hate mail. No fan mail.
There's
no mail.
No like gift certificates to Chick-fil-A. No free shout outs. Nothing. Right?
Zilch.
So in order to get, because I wanted to do a series, because I knew people had questions, and we wanted to do like questions men ask, questions women ask, which we ended up doing. I think it's down in the 70s, somewhere in there. But in order to do that, we literally had to go to Fight Club and say, or it was one of our big fight nights, and say, hey guys, just write down a bunch of questions and give them pen and paper. I don't know if it's, what is about Northern Michigan? We don't trust email. Is that what it is? But
only by reading my questions, put them out there in the cloud.
But now those episodes we did prep for that.
Yes.
We did a little more prep. Not a lot of prep, but we did more prep than usual. The questions men asked, the questions women asked.
Yep.
And I don't know if they helped any.
No, they were awesome.
But they were just like, it was like, we got a lot of questions. We're just trying to power through them.
Yeah.
Power through those questions. You notice we haven't done anything like that since because we don't like prep. we prep for sermons, man.
We had a meeting.
We had
one meeting out of the 130 episodes.
One meeting. That's all we need to have.
Oh man. We did ministry spotlights.
That's right.
Why did we do those?
For
people listening.
Yeah, I think when you see something on there that says a ministry spotlight, is there's so much going on at the church, and there's so many people on staff or part-time staff or volunteer, and you don't know what it is that they do. Every person's an amazing story.
Yeah.
That's the same reason we do a Change Life story is, the way God has done his custom work on you, on me, on Benjamin, on anyone listening, that's unique to you.
Yep. And
so the same thing within the church. There's different ministries that people don't have a clue what goes into making them happen, or they don't have a clue what the impact is.
Yeah.
And then again, church our size, we add a staff member. Like a staff member can come and go.
Yep.
Not Britton Bishop, but a staff member can come and go, and you may never even got to know them or what it is that they do, or why it is what they do. And so by doing a ministry spotlight, either on a staff person or in a ministry area, sometimes, it's similar to, I can't remember the episode number. It might have been in the 60s or 70s when we had our missionaries to Thailand.
Yep.
Brandon and Gabe Hirth.
Boomer.
Those were amazing.
Yes.
Yeah. So that allows us to get a deep dive into a deeper dive, I guess, in getting to know some of our missionaries. Because, dude, growing up, I was a missionary kid and had to travel to different churches that support us financially, and what an awkward nightmare that was. Yeah. Jim, Jeanette, Joan, Joy, John, and Joey, Jim and Joey singing about Jesus in Jamaica, and then we're like the Von Trapps, and we're on performance, and everybody's pinching your cheeks. Hey, little tiger, My kids have no idea how good they have it. They might get a shout out in a sermon where I don't even use their name, and they're like, "Oh, I'm so embarrassed." You didn't have to wear native garb and sing the first verse in English, the second verse in French, and the third verse in Creole, and set up and tear down the slideshow. Sorry, I need therapy, right? But all I'm saying is an opportunity, like the Hertz.
Right.
We got to just have a conversation with them. They could have a conversation with our church family via the podcast. Same thing with the Wests, that we just did a few episodes ago. Dean, who lives up, he's a missionary to the UP.
Yep. They need Jesus up there.
I don't think they talk that way up there,
No,
but whatever.
I think personally, and this is going to be one of my, favorite's probably not a good word at this point because I've enjoyed so many of them. One of my two of the most memorable episodes for me, and I'm fast forwarding a little bit here through some of these, but was Change Life Stories at Camp 23.
Oh, yeah. That's when you took us remote.
Yes. Doing the podcast in the boys' dorm, barracks, whatever you want to call them.
That was random.
Yeah. We pushed through. It was the only place we could find with lighting and plugins, and it was hot. It was smelly.
Was that Chris Marvin?
Yeah, Chris Marvin and Paul Epperson.
Yeah.
So we had those two on here. That was fun. What other ones?
My favorite one was when my bride
Darcy
finally caved.
Yes.
And that's when I was starting to say, and that was just a few episodes ago, it was she and Bill Stone, cut from the same cloth, were both like, okay, Britton's leaving, fine. Because we've been asking them since the beginning.
Yes. I wanted Bill like episode 3, I wanted it to be Bill.
No, and then he just did his little Bill Stone
I think he likes
thing.
to be wanted.
Doesn't everybody?
Yeah. Bill just wants to be wanted. But
Bill especially?
Yeah.
Darcy doesn't want to be wanted at all.
Hey, I got him back though. So after Bill's episode, we needed a little post-game snack. So I went to Buffalo Wild Wings. Of course Bill's buying because that's just the way life is. But him and I went and played golf the other day, and I was like, I'm going to get him back. So I bought his food without even asking him.
Did you?
Made him mad. It was worth it.
Nice. Did you say that's for being on the podcast?
No. I did it just because it made him mad. But he taught me what pull tabs are, and I still had to learn that before I left Michigan, I guess.
That's another little Michigan thing, right? No, the episode with Bill was so profound, and I've gotten. There seems to be more and more feedback that people will just mention at church, or they'll text, or I'll get like on a. Is it a DM? Is that
DM?
Yeah, I'll get a DM, a direct message.
Yep.
About both Darcy and Bill's, because Darcy shared some things that wasn't the same as what the content of Bill's, but she gave us the reels about, and I didn't know what she was going to say. Yep. And my favorite part of the episode was she was sitting right here, I'm sitting right there, and she was like, I'm telling the story now. It was like, yeah, that's what we want. Had no idea she was going to go where she did. And, but Bill's, I mean, he, my hope is that it lives online. It's going to help a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think
and that's my hope for all of them.
Right. I think theirs were so timely too, just with the time of year and different things like that as well. So, but yeah, they both gave us the reels.
Dude, I'm going to miss coming down here on Thursdays with you.
It's fun. It is. We got to figure out how to do the Zoom 2-screen thing.
Oh, yeah. So Tab Family, we're working on it. You can pray about this if you want to.
Yeah.
You know why I said it that way? I hate it when someone goes, you can be praying about this. Don't give me a job. You can ask me, but hey, y'all be praying about this now. I mean, they do that. They do that in Oklahoma. Yeah. It's, if you want to, we're trying to figure out. Well, Matt already knows.
Right.
He just needs to figure out where to put his time because he's working so hard to get Cadillac going right now. But we would love to be able to do the podcast where we can have someone remote.
Yep.
So that literally you and I could be on the podcast together, you in Oklahoma right here, and we could say, hey, Britton, how's life in Oklahoma? And then people would see your face on a screen.
Yep.
You know, I don't know how they do that voodoo, but apparently, but if we could do that, we could up our game with the guests that we have on a
Denzel
podcast.
On here if you wanted to.
Denzel. What would be your dream podcast guest? Yeah.
Dream change life story.
Or just whatever.
It would be a change life story.
Denzel for sure.
Yeah, Denzel.
Well, this is Michigan. Come on, man.
Joby Martin
would
be a good one.
That wouldn't be a change life story. I just let him talk about church.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you guys don't know who Joby Martin is, you need to
Alistair Begg.
Alistair Begg, Herschel
Pump
York,
faked.
John Woodhouse.
John Woodhouse. Yeah.
All the way from Australia.
Yes.
That would be magical.
Herschel, you still listening, bro?
Herschel, we're going to get you on here. We're going to get Herschel on. Yeah. Well, we're bringing Herschel to Michigan. We just got to get we just need people to tithe on gross and not just net.
I love it. Yeah, I think those would be some of mine.
Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, that'd be a good one. Kirk Cousins.
I mean, he's a Michigan guy.
Scotty Scheffler. He's a Christian that's really good at golf.
Okay. I know who Scotty Scheffler is. You made me watch that stupid Netflix series.
Yeah, I think those are some of the ones. But I think my all-time favorite guest was the two of us.
Well played. Well played.
I think that the getting to sit down here, that what are we talking about today episodes, still to this day will forever be a core memory of discipleship and all that stuff. You always talk about mentorship and crap like that, and it's like, it happened here. It didn't have to be the formal, but it was
on tape.
Yeah, it was fun. And the podcast isn't done yet.
The podcast is not done. Yeah.
The most asked question in our transition, not how are you doing? How are things going? How's Hope feeling? Are you guys still going to do the podcast? What's happening with the podcast?
You're like, hey, I'm up here.
I'm like, we're actually going to sell everything and just burn down the building.
We're going to burn.
Doing. Yeah.
Oh, right. That's not a bad idea.
So the podcast will continue.
The podcast is going to continue.
Yes.
We're going to struggle on. It'll probably, without Britton, suck.
No. The only way it'll be better is if people listen. And so, listeners, it's on you.
But if we can do this remote thing, I don't know.
We
could still do
we'll figure that out.
Yeah.
So,
do you have any regrets?
No.
No regrets.
Podcasting wise?
Yeah.
No. Having a meeting. It'd have been way better to say we had no meetings.
Oh no, because one means that it was an attempt.
Yeah, it was. I don't even think we actually talked about the podcast.
Yeah. You got any regrets about this guy doing our thing?
Benji? It's gonna be a sentimental moment. You're a legend, bro. It's been fun watching you just grow up, mature, continue in becoming the man that God's created you to be. And I think that you'll never admit it till you're older, but I think getting to sit in that chair has been a huge part of that. And I don't know, it's been fun watching you grow in your relationship with Christ, seeing you get fired up about Jesus, Bibles, your study Bible. My favorite picture still to this day is Benji sitting against a tree with his big old CSB study Bible at camp.
CSB.
I don't know. I think Camp 22 mattered in the discipleship of Benji Vermilia. And I think if I ever get him on this podcast, that would be one that he pointed back to.
Oh, he's on it. He's just
if I got him to do his change life story, I think that would be.
Maybe episode 200, the reveal.
The reveal.
The faceless. Because right now he's the faceless man.
We'd still have to blur it, change his voice. So, but Benji, thanks, man. It's been a ton of fun.
Thanks, kid.
It's been a joy. No free shout outs, though.
No free shout-outs.
Checks in the mail.
Checks in the mail, no free shout-outs. Yeah, he said something like, if I was getting paid out of golf.
I love it. So, yeah.
No
That's
regrets.
it. None.
Nothing but good days.
It was fun.
As
Good days.
Good days.
That's you should get to be your co-host.
Uncle Charlie?
Yeah.
No, dude. If
Good
we're doing co-host
days.
remote, it's you or nobody.
Good days.
You or
We
nobody.
need to call him.
I did.
You did.
I texted him about
Sweet.
we got an event coming
No
up.
free shout outs, Jordan. We should
Yeah.
probably close this.
Yeah, we probably should.
Tab family, it's been a joy. It's been a pleasure. This isn't goodbye forever, so I'm not going to act like it is. So, see you later.